This is Grandmaster Boris Alterman and you're watching Gambit Guide. Hello, welcome to Gambit Guide, and today is the third part of the Blackmar Diemer Gambit, which usually after d4, d5, e4, d takes e4 and knight c3, so we are reaching the main position of this gambit. However, I would like to show you today that we can reach this position from the completely different moves orders, and when continue studying the ideas and the great plans and tactical opportunities in the Blackmar Diemer Gambit, I could tell you that even on international master and even in grandmaster level, this position played many times. So I could show you that international master Molnar Della against Kadas Gabor from the Hungarian Open tournament 1997 started with this moves order. Look at that: e4, d5, and now suddenly d4. So from the Scandinavian defense, after e4, d5, d4, we just transposing into the Blackmar Diemer Gambit. D takes e4, knight c3, so reaching the same position. I believe that Black was just very surprised after knight f6, f3, e takes f3, knight takes f3, e6. So what we can study from that game, that just very fast, very rapid attack on the king's side, white organizing this game. Bishop d3. So instead of classical and standard bishop e7 or knight bd7 or c6, Black moved just more aggressive. c5, d takes c5, bishop takes c5. But after bishop g5, it's not so easy to play this position. So white is intending also knight e4, also queen e2, and then long castling. So maybe it was a bit premature for Black to open the position so fast. He played bishop e7. Indeed, after castling and castling, Bella just followed Diemer and played queen e1, which we studied just in the previous game. So white's queen is rapidly going to h4, supporting white's attack on the king's side. Sorry, knight c6 first, and after queen h4, g6. So before continue the attack, which is already quite serious, white just first of all bring one more piece in the game. Despite the fact we are having pawn down, our piece activity just compensate this small material deficit. After rook d1, white is already intending in many variations, move like bishop take g6 or just simply bishop e4, queen b6 check, king h1, and here Black realized that he cannot play knight d5, since after knight takes d5, bishop take g5 and knight take g5, there is no time to trade to capture on d5, queen takes h7 will be the checkmate. The other problem that Black also cannot move his knight away, since bishop takes e7 wins the piece. So Black is trying to play king g7, already allowing white to win exchange after bishop h6 check. However, white is going for more than just a piece and played knight e5. Black is in a very, very difficult position. Knight takes e5. This is already blunder, but what can we do? Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6. So knight on e5 is gone. King g8, queen takes e5, queen takes b2. Black has now 2 pawns for a piece, so now white is having a piece up. Rook b1, and we are very fast finishing the game. Queen a3. Possible immediately to play knight e4, but white found even the better way. Knight b5, queen e7. The last chance was, of course, to play queen a5, knight c7, and the final move of the game, knight d5. So simultaneously attack also queen on e7, also rook on b8, and as well knight f6 is another threat. So black is just in absolutely hopeless position. So if you look at the starting point when we played queen h4, it's already quite interesting to draw your attention that it's very difficult to stop already now white from playing bishop takes f6. So g6 more or less the fourth move, which weakens too much all the position of black pawns near the king. Why? Because if black is playing h6, so white just simply could sacrifice bishop takes, g takes, and queen takes h6, and it's almost impossible to stop white's attack here. So white is intending knight g5 and then bishop h7 with the decisive mating threats. The open position also allows white's rook to find the ways to reach the king side, let's say after rook d1, rook d3, and rook g3, or rook e1, rook e3, or rook e4, and then just to go to g3 with the decisive mating attack. So let's say after rook e8, we play simply knight g5. And if black is trying to sacrifice back the piece and to play bishop f8, attacking white's queen, of course we can capture on f6, but what for? And this is a checkmate in two. Check. And knight takes f7. And this is already a mate. Very typical attack. Very typical attack with bishop d3, queen e1, and queen h4 happen in a few games. In the game between Miroslav Hauske and David Moskovich from Smith and Williamson, Young Master Tournament 1999, after bishop g5, knight bd7, short castling, and queen e1, once again for black is not so easy to solve his opponent problems. So white is still intending queen h4. Knight e5 is another idea. c5 met immediately by queen h4. White is not only intending at some point to play bishop takes f6, but we have another interesting idea. Let's say c takes d4 could be met by immediate bishop takes h7 sacrifice. And after knight takes h7 and bishop takes e7, black is losing at least exchange on f8. So only after white played queen h4, black realized that the position is not so simple and moved g6. So once again, h6 could be met by bishop takes with a huge advantage for white. So just ruins completely his king side. After g6, white played very actively, knight e5. So what's the problem? The problem is that white is also intending knight g4. The bishop on e7 is so big problem for black. And blunder, rook e8. So black is trying to defend this bishop. However, what happened now? That white is just simply winning in just one move. So we can find it, I believe, without any problem, because we already saw similar combinations so many times in our gambit guide. Knight takes f7. So f7 is the weakest spot in black's position. So now in case of king takes f7, queen takes h7, and white is coming with the bishop h6 and the checkmate. And if after knight takes f7, black played queen c7, similar combination, bishop take g6, h take g6, check on h8, finally reaching the black's king, queen h7, no time to capture our queen because knight on f6 is pinned, and after king f8, Miroslav Hauske just finished game with a nice checkmate pattern after bishop h6. So once again we see how fast white organized his attack on the king side. One more example was played with white pieces by Lars Rasmussen in the Philadelphia World Open Tournament 1988. And look, from the different moves order, d4, knight f6. So now white played very safe opening line, knight c3, and after d5, suddenly gambit, e4. So transposing into the Blackmar Diemer gambit. Of course, black could play here knight takes e4 immediately, and after knight takes e4, d takes e4, and f3. So we are getting almost to the similar position. D takes played in the game f3, e takes f3, and knight takes f3. So the setup with knight takes f3 becomes, as you can understand, the most popular in this line. After e6, as I explained before, by playing e6, black is locking the a2 g8 diagonal, so it's no point for us to move the bishop anymore to this diagonal, so we move to d3, looking towards the h7 pawn, bishop e7, short castling, knight bd7, and once again queen e1, same setup. So queen is coming to h4. So in the game, black played knight bd7, queen e1, and already square to go for the short castling, where we saw so many dangerous attacks from white side, and played knight f8, trying first of all to protect the king side with the knight on g6, only then to play short castling. But the knight f8 and knight g6 just a time-consuming maneuver, and white of course getting more and more development advantage. Knight e4, bishop d7, knight e5, so activating our pieces. So now we're dominating also in the center, and also f7 pawn is a serious target. White is ready to meet knight g6 by another unpleasant move, knight g5, attacking the f7 pawn, and also force black to castle, since knight takes e5, d takes e5 leads to the losing position, so f7 pawn is gone. There is no way to escape. So white, of course, ready for short castling. c3, first of all, to support the center. Once again, black cannot capture on e5, because after d takes e5, the catastrophe is on h7 square. So knight just cannot move from f6, because we have so many pieces looking towards the h7 square. c5, knight take g6, h take g6, and finally queen came to h4. How to stop? Rook takes f6, and then queen takes h7, checkmate. So black has only one solution, rook e8. And now white went for tactics. Rook takes f6. I don't think it was so necessary, but possible was just simply to bring the bishop to e3, keeping quite huge advantage. After bishop takes f6, queen check, and bishop f4, white is intending the checkmate very fast after bishop d6. There is no time for black to capture on g5, because bishop d6 check, and after bishop e7 or rook e7, doesn't matter, queen h8, and this is a checkmate. So black has to answer bishop c6, rook e1. Once again, it's no time for black to capturing, because check and bishop take g5 with a very big advantage. Let's say f6 is losing after queen take g7. Black played queen d7, and after d takes c5, threat is bishop d6. So black blundered after queen takes d3 and bishop d6. Here is inevitable checkmate. Same idea, rook e7 or bishop e7, queen h7 to h8, and this is a checkmate. However, even after the best move like e5, still white is having a strong position by playing just simply bishop to c4, and still black cannot touch any of white pieces. E takes f4 will be met by queen h8, and this is a checkmate. So another very sharp attack on the king side by Lars Rasmussen. So we have seen so many opportunities for white when white is just developing his attack with the knights, which are so active and dominating. Maybe it's a good idea already in the opening and to try and to exchange white's knight on f3, getting rid of this quite active piece. So in few games black tested the bishop g4 move. However, in here it's not so easy to solve all the problems. After h3, bishop takes f3 and queen takes f3, c6, queen f2. So white is intending to bring the bishop to f4 to g5, e6 and bishop d3. White has two bishops and quite interesting compensation for a pawn. Bishop e7, casting short side. So this happened in the game between Nicolas Tripoter and T.S. Bakre in the some Champion Challenge Tournament 2005. So white is having his classical and standard pressure over the f-file. After knight bd7, white played queen g3, threading g7 pawn, g6, then bishop comes to h6, and black decided to play queen b6, and after queen f2, like to trade the bishop after bishop f8, which is a serious mistake, since white is playing bishop g5 and black cannot avoid the catastrophe over the f-file. If it was of course necessary here, instead of bishop f8, to play long castling with a playable position. So bishop f8 after bishop g5 and bishop g7, white simply played knight e4, and black found out that there is no way to stop losing of his piece, since knight takes e4 will be met by queen takes f7, and this is a checkmate. So in second game, which played also with bishop g4 takes f3 idea, black chose to play immediately c6. Instead of moving the queen back to f2, white instantly started his attack, and like in Emil Diemer style, ready to sacrifice the pawn on d4. So in that case, after queen takes d4 and bishop e3 and then long castling, so white is getting enormous compensation for 2 pawns. So the additional threat for white always is g4 and g5. So light square bishop is coming to c4, e6. So white takes now more space on the king side, g4, g5, knight d5, bishop d3. So this happened in the game between Gyula Mesgaros and Klaus Ernst from the Swiss Open 1994. Bishop d3, bishop b4, castling short side, threading the checkmate on f7, queen e7, and now knight e4, knight e7, a3. So black cannot move the bishop on d6 anymore, because after knight takes d6 and queen takes f7, white is just winning f7 pawn with no any compensation. So necessary to go to a5. But we play now simply c4, and black is in big trouble. He cannot move his knight away, since after knight b6 or knight c7, white plays simply b4, and this dark square bishop is trapped. So thanks to the great control over the center squares and very active pieces, so white is just getting material advantage. So b4 and winning the bishop after c5 next move. So after c4, black tried to play f5, but white simply and calmly played knight f2, and there is no way to escape b4 and c5. Black already resigned. So if you know, if you've seen that Blackmar Diemer gambit only sometimes playable on advanced levels, that I can show you that even one of the greatest chess players in the last history, Dragolub Velimirovich, the leading grandmaster from former Yugoslavian Republic, and of course participated in many chess Olympiads, and the author of the famous Velimirovich attack in the Sicilian defense, played Blackmar Diemer gambit against another grandmaster, Bilon Lopez, from the Metz Open Tournament in 1988. In that game, Bilon Lopez once again followed the bishop g4 plan, which was considered as one of the interesting plans. So trying to trade white's knight on f3 after h3, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and c6. So we saw now queen f2 move, which I cannot recommend because it just wastes too much time. Another interesting move, the g4, which we studied in the previous game, and Velimirovich moved his bishop immediately to f4. Once again, as I said before, sacrificed the pawn. Black decided to avoid the sacrifice and played e6, follow the main opening principle, just continue development of his pieces, long castling, bishop b4. So once again, black is trying to exchange the other white's knight. So it's quite a classical way of playing. Now if white is moving his knight away after knight a2, black attacking position of white queen, and at the same time a2 pawn is under threat. So more or less queen d5 force white to trade the queens, which after which of course white's initiative disappeared just. So Velimirovich played bishop d2, knight bd7, brings the bishop to d3, and after knight b6 started to look for targets in the black's position. Queen g3, attacking the g7 pawn. Queen e7, rook h to f1. So white is having some compensation for a pawn, but of course, as I said before, the Bilon Lopez is quite strong Spain grandmaster, and he's trying to play very, very safe. Rook g8, and here suddenly started rook takes f6. This combination, I believe that Bilon Lopez just overlooked. The point of this rook takes f6 move, that of course we cannot capture with g pawn, g takes f6, because queen takes g8, the rook is hanging. And after queen takes f6, white can play bishop g5, and suddenly black's queen is a very, very tough situation. Queen takes d4 would be only move, but then bishop takes h7, white is winning the g8 rook for free. So rook takes f6 came as a very big surprise. So black answered bishop takes c3 and bishop takes c3. Queen takes f6. White has two strong bishop, a lot of open files, and black's king is still in the center, and Velimirovich continued his attack with d4, d5, breaking through the center. So now if queen h6 checks, then bishop d2. Black played queen e7, d6. Now white got the strong pass pawn, and after queen d7 and bishop takes h7, forced black to sacrifice the exchange, because rook cannot move, not to f8, because bishop takes g7, and not to h8, because queen takes to g7, and black's position is very, very difficult. So after long castling, bishop takes g8. So now suddenly white achieved quite serious positional advantage, since this pawn on d6 is very, very strong. So I could tell you that ideas of Blackmar Diemer also quite popular in the games of Norwegian Grandmaster Rune Djurhuus, who played it quite often, and the Russian 2500 player Alexei Kislinsky used it a few times. So the last question, which of course you can ask, so what happened in case when black is not accepting the pawn sacrifice and playing after f3, simply e3? So in the game Kislinsky against Alexei Potapov from Zvenigrad Open Tournament 2008 shows that after bishop takes e3, c6, so white is just continue developing in the normal way. Bishop goes to d3, queen to d2, white is ready for long castling, then knight comes to e2, this knight from c4 once again going to the center to e4, so f3 pawn support the control over the e4 square, just help us to get I would say more domination position of all our pieces in the center. So let's look at just a few more moves from that game. Bishop f5, knight e4, knight bd7, knight e2. So now black is trying to counterattack white's center by bishop takes e4 and then e5, trying to create white the isolated pawn on e4, but simply c3. Very nice position, so white is having the pawn center, two bishops, and semi-open f-file. Bishop g7, h3, avoiding any business with knight g4, queen e7, knight g3, and then white is going to play short castle and bring the rook to the center. Still, white's position is slightly better. With e4, e3, you just cannot contradict white's the gambit idea, the d4, d5 lines, which we call the Blackmar Diemer gambit variation. So with this third lecture, I would like to finish my course about the Blackmar Diemer gambit. So I believe that you're now more familiar with the typical plans, typical attacks, and typical tactical opportunity for white in this opening line, and I wish that you can also include in the opening repertoire this quite aggressive opening line. Thanks everybody for watching. See you next time.